So by now you've heard of the murder of this young Australian man, Christopher Lane. The media has a motive: boredom. Yeah, when you're bored, you kill people. But by blaming boredom, you could ignore recent tweets by one suspect who boasted hating white people. The suspected shooter reveled in gang signs and gang colors and bragged about knocking out 5 white people since the Zimmerman verdict. If you aren't familiar with this knocking out trend, it's where gangs cold cock strangers, sometimes killing them. The media stayed away from this. Even though it's a hate crime, it's not their kind of hate crime. Given the tweets and this gang stuff, will the Justice Department see this as a hate crime? I don't think so. It fits no storyline found on HBO's Newsroom or Law & Order. Yeah, Law & Order, the favorite show among shut-ins and their double-stuffed Oreos. They're planning a Trayvon Martin episode, calling it an American tragedy. But the other American tragedy are those producers and networks and hacks who accept violence through unconscious bigotry. They just don't think it's fair to demand a community what it demands from their own. Even if the crime isn't about race, and maybe it isn't, it's an evil act rooted in destructive lifestyles and broken communities. In the media's eyes, a black teen is invisible until he's a body. And a dead Australian is just the price you pay to be politically correct. Hey, Katie. Yeah. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Do you buy this boredom thing? They were just bored?
You know, I don't think that the word bored is the correct term. I think that these were teenagers who didn't have productive things to do, as we see when teenagers aren't given productive things to do. But I think the key here that no one really wants to talk about is that these guys came from broken homes. The guy accused of pulling the trigger, James Edwards, posted pictures of himself, wielding firearms in an inappropriate and disrespectful way on his Vine account on social media. His mother is in jail. She's not around, so that means that he's not spending time with his mother. The district attorney said that these kids were running around the apartment complex, basically raising themselves. And there was a gang initiation issue here as well. There were reports saying that these guys were involved in gang initiation, that there were more kids on the list of people to be taken out that day. And it really comes down to, them not having the guidance they need and not having more productive things to do.
That's a good point. There was one gentleman who's, I believe, one of his son, his name is James Johnson. His son was on one of these hit lists, and he's the guy that I guess raised the idea that it was a gang initiation thing. Let's roll that.
I don't think it was at random. I think it was the initiation.
Gang initiation.
Because I understand that after that happened, there's a list that so-called pops up with my son's name at the top of the list and 4 others they was going to bump off.
So you think that early killing, even though they didn't know who Chris Lane was, it could have been a gang initiation?
I believe so.
So, Bob, Mediaite, website for media hacks like myself, points out that the media routinely will, like in the Zimmerman case, will bring up race, but avoid describing, like, the race characteristics in Chris Lane's killing. Is that a fair point?
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. But let's go back to the point about whether it's a hate crime or not. It seems to me once this guy said and he typed out that he hated white people, and I do think there's a gang, and this has an awful lot of similarities to the gang initiation rights in Los Angeles that I've heard about. I think that the Justice Department, at a minimum, ought to investigate the possibility they are dealing with a hate crime, even though it won't bring them the death penalty, which I'm against anyway. But it seems to me you could broaden this out to a bigger issue than simply just being bored.
Eric, do you believe it matters whether it's gang?
No. We're talking about who cares. It is a hate crime. He said, in fact, he tweeted, #hate him. 90% of white people are mean or angry, whatever. He said, #hate him.
Said they were gross.
He literally said, this is a hate crime. Who cares? They're going to get, if convicted, they're going to get life behind bars. They can't get the death penalty because they're under 18. My issue is that the media is not calling this what this is. These are 2 black kids. The shooter's black. He killed a white guy. He said he hates white people. I hate him. #hate him. This is a black on white violence that the media doesn't like. It doesn't fit their debate. They want to hear white on black crime. They don't want to talk about black on black crime, and they don't want to talk about black on white crime. The only thing that fits the rundown on MSNBC seems to be white on black crime.
What about this, Dana? The fact that it almost feels like, since the Trayvon Martin stuff, a game of like race poker, where I see your white on black crime and I raise you with our black on white crime. Is it just better to look at the at the decline of the family and a destructive culture than the color of skin, or is it important?
That's why I've always instinctively been against hate crime legislation, because crime is crime, and as soon as you start trying to define it, and then it's a race crime, or is it a hate crime, is it a crime against gays, yeah, I think that crime is crime. And one of the things that does bother me, I do think it matters if it is gang violence, because if that is a resurgent problem in urban areas, or this was even an urban area. Okay, it was 40 to 80 miles, I think it was 80 miles from Oklahoma City. Boredom, I'm not buying it. However, there's not a lot of employment. You do have the broken home problem. There's not a lot of direction. And in some ways, I think we could take a lesson from our military. I don't know. I think Bob's not going to like this, but I just had this idea. Remember when General Petraeus designed the surge in Iraq? And the point was to go in, you had to stop the violence, and then you could then start to deal with the root causes, and you had to get more police into the community. I think maybe that is what we need all across America. And if localities and municipalities want to participate, then the federal government could probably help them.
Yeah, I agree.
We have a lot of vets that have come back. We could put them to use all of those skills that they learned, the leadership skills that they learned overseas, in order to try to help deal with this problem. At least stop it, and then we have to figure out the housing problem.
That's almost how they reduce a lot of the killing in Chicago, was just a higher presence of police.
And, why were they bored? They were bored because they didn't have jobs. They weren't working. So they're sitting around doing nothing. How are we going to keep ourselves busy? Let's go kill some kid. Oh, here's one right there. I happen to hate white kids. He's white. He's that way. Let's shoot him. Then we had the discussion. Remember, we had the discussion on stop and frisk. And one of the points we were making, or the point I was making, is that the crime was very much tied to poverty and jobs, more so than necessarily stop and frisk. However, this is not a stop and frisk discussion. It's simply, if we bring more jobs, if more kids are able to hold a job down, maybe they won't be bored and they won't be looking to do something as stupid as this.
Yeah, but you know what? You can't. There are a lot of people without jobs who are poor, who aren't killing people. And if you look at the parallel, crime is going down in the United States while there's unemployment, while unemployment is stagnant or going up. So I don't know if